The parking lot of Seohan Group's private estate was not a place for singing. It was cold. Vast. Lit by a single overhead lamp that flickered every few seconds like it was deciding whether to give up entirely. The smell was motor oil and winter air, and the particular silence that does not just surround a person, it gets inside them. Past midnight, the black fleet of luxury vehicles sat still in their rows, each one worth more than 10 years of Yoonho's salary, none of them caring that he was there. He stood with his back to them. White cane loose in his right hand, tip barely touching the concrete. His house staff uniform, pressed gray slacks, a collarless shirt missing one button at the collar, a jacket too thin for late October in Seoul, did not protect him from the cold. He did not seem to notice. Or perhaps he had simply stopped expecting warmth. He cleared his throat softly. And then, quietly, the way a person speaks to themselves when they are certain no one is listening, he began to sing. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. His voice was low, unhurried. Not the voice of a performance. It was the voice of a man who had decided that if no one else was going to mark the day, he would mark it himself. With whatever he had. Which tonight was only this: a cold parking lot, a flickering lamp, and the melody his mother used to sing before she got sick and the world got heavy and everything Yoonho had been building quietly collapsed. Happy birthday, dear Yoonho. Happy birthday to me. He exhaled when the last note ended. Tilted his face upward, a habit he had developed over years of lost sight, as though his skin could receive what his eyes no longer could. A small smile crossed his lips. Private. Unguarded. The kind of smile that does not expect to be witnessed. He did not know it was being witnessed. Approximately 4 meters behind him, near the steel column beside the elevator bay, 3 men stood without moving. Not one of them made a sound. The cold did not seem to reach them the way it reached Yoonho. Or maybe it did and they had simply learned not to show it. 3 men who had restructured companies, extracted information from rooms full of careful people, and noticed things that others walked past without seeing. 3 men who had never once, in 8 months, looked at the figure in the gray uniform long enough to register his face. They were looking now. Yoonho finished his song. Stood still for one more moment, face tilted up, the private smile fading back into the composed expression he wore like a second uniform. Then he turned to walk back inside. He stopped. He could not see them. He had not been able to truly see anything in years. But Yoonho had learned long ago that blindness does not leave a person with less, it leaves them with different. And what his body told him, in the space between one step and the next, was that the air had changed. The parking lot was not empty anymore. The silence had weight in it now. Warm, human weight. More than one person. Standing very still in the way that people stand still when they do not want to be noticed, and are not used to being the ones who go unseen. His grip on the cane tightened. Only slightly. His expression did not change. He walked past them toward the door. Shoulders straight. Steps measured. Giving nothing away. The door closed behind him. And in the parking lot, not one of the 3 men moved for a long moment. It was Kangmin who spoke first. His voice was low. Almost to himself. Like the question had come out before he decided to ask it. How long has he been working here? 8 months, Daehoon said. Kangmin looked at the door. I've never noticed him. No, Daehoon said quietly. You wouldn't have. By 5:30 the next morning, Yoonho was already in the East Wing kitchen. The stove was on. The timer was set. His hands moved through the prep work the way they always did, without hesitation, without looking, following a map he had built inside himself during his first week at the estate, and never needed to update. He knew where every pan hung. He knew the distance between the cutting board and the sink down to the centimeter. He knew that the third burner ran hot, and the exhaust fan had a rattle that started exactly 40 seconds after you switched it on. He knew this kitchen the way he knew most things now. By feel. By memory. By the kind of attention that only develops when you cannot afford to be careless. Byung-chan arrived at 5:42, still pulling his uniform jacket straight, and stopped in the kitchen doorway the way he always did when he clocked something was off. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm always quiet." "You're quieter than always." Byung-chan moved to the counter and picked up a prep knife without being asked. He had worked the East Wing for 2 years before Yoonho arrived, and he had attached himself to Yoonho with the particular loyalty of someone who recognized a person worth knowing before anyone else did. "Something happened last night." It was not a question. Yoonho did not answer it like one. "The estate is talking," Byung-chan said, lowering his voice. "I heard it from Suyun's assistant this morning before I even got my shoes on. Apparently someone was in the parking lot last night who was not supposed to be there." Yoonho kept his hands moving. "The triplets were there," Byung-chan said. "All 3. At the same time. Which apparently never happens." He paused, like he was deciding how much to say. Then he said all of it, because that was what Byung-chan did. "Kang-min is the one the company fears. He does not explain himself. He does not smile at people. He ends meetings by standing up and walking out when he thinks they are below his time, and no one has ever once told him that is rude, because they are too afraid." Another pause. "Seo-jun smiles at everyone. That is worse. He goes to the events, and says the right things and shakes the right hands and then goes home and tells Kang-min everything useful he pulled out of every person in that room. He is the nicest danger you will ever meet." The knife came down cleanly on the board. "And Daehoon is the one you do not see coming. Quiet. Always in the library. But he notices things. People who have worked here for years say he notices things that should not be noticeable." Byung-chan set the knife down. "Yoonho. If any of those 3 are paying attention to you, the only correct move is to disappear. You make yourself smaller. You make yourself forgettable. You do not become interesting to the Seohan triplets. That is a road that does not have a good end." Yoonho turned off the nearest burner. He reached for the serving tray. His hands were steady. "I understand," he said. "Do you?" "Yes, Byung-chan." Byung-chan watched him for another moment, then picked up the knife again. The kitchen settled back into its rhythm, the rattle of the exhaust fan, the soft percussion of prep work, the low heat of the stove. What Yoonho did not say was this. He already knew their names. He had known them since his 2nd week at the estate, when he had learned every name in the building the way he learned everything, carefully, thoroughly, and for reasons he kept to himself. He had known which footsteps in the upper corridor belonged to Kang-min, and which belonged to Daehoon. He had heard Seojun's voice in the main hall and recognized the particular quality of it, warm on the surface, calculating underneath, and filed it away like every other piece of information he was not supposed to have. He had known them for 8 months. He had simply been waiting to matter enough for them to know his. Madame Suyun came to find him at 9:10, while he was refolding linens in the East Corridor storage room. She did not say good morning. She did not look at him the way a person looks at another person. She looked at a point approximately 6 inches above his left shoulder and said, in the clipped tone she used for instructions she expected to be followed without discussion, that he was to come with her to the main study. Yoonho set down the linen he was holding. He followed her. The main study was on the 2nd floor of the central building, behind a pair of dark wood doors that Yoonho had cleaned twice a week for 8 months without ever being invited inside. He knew the room by the smell of it, cedar, old paper, something expensive and faintly metallic that he had never been close enough to identify. He stepped through the doors and the smell was stronger now, and underneath it was something else. The specific quality of air in a room that holds people who are used to being the most important presence in any space they enter. "Sit," Madame Suyun said. And then she left. Yoonho sat. He found the chair without searching for it. He set his cane against his knee. He folded his hands in his lap and waited, and his face gave nothing away, because Yoonho had learned a long time ago that the only power available to a person in a room like this one was the power of being unreadable. Kang-min spoke first. His voice came from behind the desk, straight ahead, approximately 3 meters, slightly elevated in the way of someone seated in a chair designed to communicate authority. You've been with the household staff for 8 months. Yes. Before that, Seohan University. School of Business. First in your cohort. A pause that was not a pause. It was a period at the end of a sentence. Scholarship dissolved on a technicality when your attendance record was affected by a medical situation your department was informed of and chose not to accommodate. The room was very quiet. We are funding an accessibility initiative, Seojun said. His voice came from the left, near the window. Warmer than Kangmin's. Measured in a different way. It requires an internal candidate. Someone who can move through the estate and through the university campus and identify the gaps, practical, structural, institutional, that make both environments inaccessible. Someone who understands those environments from the inside. A brief beat. Both of them. From somewhere to the right, farther back, near the wall, Daehoon said nothing. But Yoonho felt the quality of his attention the way you feel a change in temperature. The offer was laid out in precise terms. A formal appointment. A salary that was not a house staff salary. Access to both environments. A timeline of 3 months. At the end, a report that would be used to inform Seohan Group's institutional policy going forward. It was generous. More than generous. It was, practically speaking, impossible to refuse. Emotionally, it was the reopening of something Yoonho had sealed very carefully and not touched in 2 years. He sat with that for exactly as long as he allowed himself to. Then he straightened in the chair. What made you choose me for this? He asked. The question landed in the room and did not move. Kangmin's chair shifted slightly, the small sound of someone leaning forward. When he spoke again, his voice was the same flat temperature it had been from the beginning. But something in it was different. More direct. The way a blade is more direct than a discussion. We need someone honest, he said. Are you honest, Yoonho? Yoonho's hands stayed still in his lap. He thought about the parking lot. The song. The 4 meters of cold air between himself and 3 men he was not supposed to know were there. He thought about 8 months of learning a house that did not belong to him, of knowing names he was never given permission to know, of understanding exactly where he was and why, and saying none of it to anyone. Yes, he said. He should have asked Kangmin the same question. He did not. Not yet. The east entrance of Seohan University's School of Business building opened at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning, and the sound of it hit Yoonho before anything else did. The atrium. He knew it by its echo, the particular way sound moved in a wide, high-ceilinged space full of hard floors and glass and the low constant hum of people in motion. Students. Dozens of them, maybe more, their footsteps overlapping into a kind of white noise that pressed against him from every direction. Somewhere to the left, the campus cafe. He could smell it, coffee and warm bread and something sweet. Somewhere ahead, the corridor that led to the School of Business main hall, where he had once walked every morning like he belonged there. He had not been inside this building in 2 years. His grip on the cane tightened once. He released it. The accessibility audit starts on the east corridor, Daehoon said, from just to his right. Not close enough to crowd him. Not far enough to be formal. Exactly the distance of someone who had thought about it before arriving. I'll walk it with you. Yoonho nodded once and they moved. Daehoon did not guide him. He did not reach for his arm or hover or explain the path before Yoonho had the chance to find it himself. He walked beside him at a pace that matched Yoonho's without appearing to adjust, and he was quiet in the way that some people are quiet, not uncomfortably, not waiting to fill the silence, just present in it. Won-sok fell into step on the other side, Daehoon's aide, broad-shouldered, watchful, with the particular stillness of someone trained to assess threats before they fully form. He looked at Yoonho for a long moment when they were introduced, the kind of look that takes inventory. Yoonho let him look. How do you want to document the findings? Won-sok asked. Flat. Professional. The question of someone testing whether the answer will be worth his time. Voice recorder, Yoonho said. I'll narrate observations as I move. Timestamps at each location marker. I'll need someone to confirm visual details I can't verify directly: surface materials, signage height, color contrast ratios on any posted information. A short pause. That works, Won-suk said. The inventory look shifted into something that was not quite approval but was the step before it. They were 20 minutes into the corridor assessment when the wheelchair appeared. His name was Jin-hyuk. He was a second-year student, and he had been navigating the East Corridor in a manual wheelchair for 7 months, and he moved with the confidence of someone who has mapped every obstacle in a space out of pure necessity. He stopped when he saw Yoonho. Not the polite pause of passing strangers, a real stop. The kind that meant recognition of something. Are you doing the audit? Jin-hyuk asked. Yes. The gap between the elevator doors is 4 centimeters wider on the left side than the right. The ramp at the east entrance has a cross slope that pulls left. It's not enough to be dangerous for a power chair, but it's enough to be exhausting over a full day. And the accessible bathroom on this floor runs out of paper towels by noon because whoever ordered the dispenser put it too high for half the people who need it to actually reach. Yoonho was already speaking into the recorder. Jin-hyuk watched him with an expression that was bright and a little raw, the way people look when they have been saying something for a long time to people who did not write it down. Dae-hoon stood 2 steps back. He did not look at Jin-hyuk. He looked at Yoonho, at the economy of his movements, the speed of his documentation, the way he asked Jin-hyuk 3 follow-up questions that went 2 layers deeper than the information he had been given. Dae-hoon's expression did not change. But something behind it did. Very quietly. Like a dial turning 1 degree in a new direction. By the time the corridor assessment was complete, Jin-hyuk had given them 11 documented issues and a hand-drawn map of the building's worst access failures that he had apparently been carrying in his bag for 6 months waiting for someone to ask. Yoonho filed the map under the voice notes. His movements were clean and practiced and exact. Dae-hoon was quiet for a long moment after the last recording was made. Then, not loudly, not with any particular emphasis, the way someone speaks when they are confirming something they have already decided is true, he said. You've done this before. It was not a question. Yoonho did not answer it. But the silence that followed was the kind that answers things on its own, and Yoonho knew, 1 breath too late, that he had just given Dae-hoon something he had not meant to give yet. 3 weeks in, and the pattern had established itself without either of them naming it. Every campus audit day, Dae-hoon came. Not Kang-min, who ran the initiative on paper. Not Si-jun, who had approved the budget. Dae-hoon. Always present at the east entrance at the same time, always positioned at the same careful distance, always quiet in that particular way of his that was not absence but attention. Yoonho had stopped being surprised by it after the first week. He had not stopped noticing it. Those were different things. The library happened on a Thursday evening, late enough that the estate had gone still. Dae-hoon had pulled 2 chairs to the low reading table near the south window, the one that caught the last of the light, Won-suk had told Yoonho once, though that detail was not useful to him the way it was to sighted people. What was useful was that the south window table was away from the doors, away from the foot traffic of the household, away from anyone who might pass through and require a shift in register. They were reviewing audit documentation. That was the reason they were there. Yoonho knew it was also not the only reason, and he did not say so. There's a paper from 2019, Dae-hoon said, turning a page. Park Sung-jin's Corporate Ethics Framework. It's cited in 2 of the university's current accessibility policy documents as the structural basis for their institutional approach. It has 3 methodological gaps, Yoonho said. The sampling criteria excludes facilities with fewer than 200 daily users, which means it systematically undercounts the environments where access failures are most concentrated. The cost-benefit model it uses treats accommodation as a line item rather than a baseline, which produces numbers that always make accommodation look optional. And the entire framework assumes the person experiencing the barrier is available to report it, which is a circular problem that the paper never addresses. Dae-hoon went still. Not the stillness of someone who has stopped moving. The stillness of someone whose thinking has paused in the middle of a step. You read it? he said. I wrote a response to it. A beat. 3rd year. Before. The words sat between them. Before. Small and exact and carrying the weight of everything it did not say. Daehoon did not push. He did not ask what before meant, though the shape of it was clear enough. He was quiet for a moment in the way that felt like respect rather than avoidance. Then he reached to the side of his chair and placed something on the table in front of Yoonho. A book. Slim. The texture of the cover under Yoonho's fingertips was different from standard print. He knew it immediately. Braille. He turned it over and read the title with the pads of 3 fingers, and his chest did something he was not prepared for. It was a collection of Korean corporate ethics case studies. A Braille edition. Not a converted scan with OCR errors. A proper Braille edition, formatted correctly, the kind that took intention to source. Daehoon had not been asked. He had simply noticed, and acted, and said nothing about it. Yoonho set the book down. He did not thank him yet. He needed a moment that he did not have time to take, so he took it anyway, running his thumb along the edge of the cover, keeping his face composed. The door behind them opened. Seojun stepped in, one hand loose at his side, the other carrying a glass of water he had clearly come for as a reason rather than a purpose. He looked at the two of them at the south window table, at the Braille book, at the 2 chairs angled slightly toward each other, at the particular quality of the silence he had walked into. He did not say anything. Seojun, who always said something. Seojun, who had a comment for every room he entered and an observation for every person he passed. He looked, and he understood what he was looking at, and he left without the glass of water he had come for. That silence he took with him was louder than anything he could have said. Daehoon turned back to the table. His hand moved to the open page to correct the orientation of a document. His fingers landed just over Yoonho's hand, not on it, just over it, close enough that Yoonho felt the warmth before the contact. Either of them moved. 3 full seconds. I should go, Yoonho said. Yes, Daehoon said. Either of them moved. Then Daehoon's phone screen lit up on the table. He turned it face down in one smooth motion, fast enough that Yoonho did not need to see the name on the screen. The speed itself was the information. The way Daehoon's shoulders changed. The way the warmth in the room dropped 2 degrees in the space of a single breath. Yoonho had spent years learning to read what his eyes could not give him. He read that moment clearly. Whatever was on that screen was not a problem with a clean shape. It was the kind of problem that has been managed for a long time and has recently gotten less manageable. It was the kind of problem that puts a very careful man on edge in a room where he thought he was safe. Yoonho picked up his cane. He did not ask. He did not press. But he filed it. The way he filed everything. And as he walked out of the library, what stayed with him was not the warmth of Daehoon's hand near his, or the book on the table, or the 3 seconds of stillness that had held something unspoken inside it. What stayed with him was the shape of Daehoon's fear. Because Yoonho knew that shape. He had lived inside it for 2 years. And whatever Daehoon was afraid of, it was already close. The snow started without warning, the way the most important things always do. Yoonho felt it before he heard it. The way the rooftop air changed, went softer, the city noise below dropping half a register as the first snow of the season began to fall over Seoul. He had come up here during the audit lunch break because this was what snow did to sound, and sound was how he read the world, and he had needed, for just a few minutes, to stand inside something beautiful. He was not expecting company. The rooftop door opened. One set of footsteps. He knew them immediately, not Daehoon's measured pace, not Seojun's easy stride. These footsteps were deliberate and unhurried in the way of someone who has never once in his life needed to announce himself, because every room he entered already knew to make space. Come in. He stopped beside Yoonho. Not close enough to be informal. Not far enough to be dismissive. He said nothing for a long time, and the snow kept falling, and the city below them blurred soft and white and quiet. You're not afraid of me, Kangmin said finally. Yoonho considered the question the way he considered all questions, honestly, and without the performance of humility. Should I be? He said. Another silence. Longer this time. Most people are, Kangmin said. Not with pride. With something closer to exhaustion. Most people haven't had their lives taken apart by something bigger than one man, Yoonho said. After that, individual danger stops feeling like the worst thing possible. Kangmin turned his head. Yoonho felt the shift in his attention, the full weight of it, the kind of focus that Kangmin apparently gave very few people and which felt, even aimed at someone who could not see it, like standing in direct light. The audit was my idea, Kangmin said. Not the initiative. The audit. You specifically. He let that land. I reviewed the parking lot footage the morning after your birthday. Before I erased it. A pause that held no apology. I have watched you for 8 months, Yoonho. I watched you memorize this house. I watched you navigate spaces that would have stopped other people, without once asking anyone to adjust for you. I watched you understand things about this estate that you were never supposed to understand, and I watched you choose, every single day, to say nothing. His voice did not warm. But it opened slightly, the way a locked room opens, not wide, just enough to show there is something inside. That is not a common thing. I find it unusual. The snow fell between them. Yoonho's chest expanded with something he did not have a clean name for. He stood inside it without flinching. You built something out of watching me, he said quietly. Yes. And now you want to know if I'll build something out of knowing that. Kangmin was quiet for 3 full seconds. Yes, he said again. It was the most honest thing Yoonho had heard from a powerful person in 2 years. It was not warm. It was not soft. It was the kind of honesty that does not dress itself up, that simply stands in front of you and says, this is what is true, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Yoonho felt the warmth of Kangmin beside him despite the cold, despite the snow, despite every rational reason to maintain the distance that their positions had always required. He did not step away. Kangmin turned to leave. His footsteps moved toward the rooftop door and then stopped. Yoonho. His name in Kangmin's mouth sounded like a decision that had already been made and was only now being spoken aloud. The file on your father's termination. I found it. The cane went still in Yoonho's hand. I know what Seohan did to him. The snow kept falling. The city kept blurring soft below them. Yoonho's grip on the cane did not tighten. It did not need to. The stillness that moved through his body was not the stillness of shock. It was the stillness of a man who has been carrying a weight alone for so long that the first offer of help lands somewhere below language. So do I, Yoonho said. His voice was level. Precise. Undamaged. I have known for 8 months. They called him into the main study the next morning, all 3 of them, and Yoonho knew before he sat down that this conversation was different from the last one. The quality of the room had changed. The careful professional distance that had structured every previous meeting was gone, replaced by something tighter, more direct. Seo-jun was not leaning against the window this time. He was seated. Dae-hoon was not standing apart near the wall. He was at the table, close. Kangmin was behind the desk, but he had pushed back from it slightly, a small change in posture that on any other man would mean nothing, and on Kangmin meant that formality had been set aside on purpose. Seo-jun spoke first. His voice had its warmth, but stripped down, the public layer gone, what remained underneath clean and precise. The man responsible for your father's wrongful termination is still employed by Seohan Group, he said. His name is Cha Won-soo. Mid-level Operations Director, Manufacturing Division. He has been in that position for 11 years, protected by board alliances that predate the 3 of us taking operational control. He folded his hands on the table. We have known about him for 2 years, Yoonho said. Why hasn't he been removed? Because acting costs, Kangmin said. Flat. Exact. No decoration. We calculated the cost at the time and chose not to pay it. The alliances protecting him were connected to 3 board members whose cooperation we needed for a restructure that affected 4,000 jobs. We made a calculation. A beat. It was the wrong one. We knew that and made it anyway. The room absorbed that. Yoonho sat with it, the admission, the weight of it, the specific quality of a powerful man who does not excuse himself. I am not a good person, Kangmin said. But I am honest. You make me want to be different, Daehoon said quietly, to no one in particular, and the words landed in the room like something that had been held for a long time and finally released. Sejun looked at his brother. Said nothing. Looked back at Yoonho. We are telling you now, Daehoon continued steadier, because you deserve to know. And because we want you to choose, with everything in front of you, nothing hidden, whether you stay. His voice did not press. It offered. That choice belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. Yoonho looked at the space in front of him. He thought about his father, a careful, honest man who had worked 30 years inside a machine that chewed through careful, honest men without slowing down. He thought about the scholarship, the collapsed future, his mother's face when the hospital bills started arriving. He thought about 8 months of folding other people's linens inside the house of the family that had taken everything, and the specific discipline it had required to do that work without rage, without bitterness, with only the clean intention of surviving. And then he thought about a braille book placed on a table without being asked. About footsteps that stopped outside a door and chose not to knock. About a man standing beside him in the snow and saying, "This is what is true." They were the sons of the institution that had broken his father. They had power they had chosen poorly and were now, explicitly, telling him so. They were not good men in the uncomplicated sense. They were honest ones. And in Yoonho's experience, honesty was considerably rarer and considerably more useful than goodness. He stayed. Not from desperation. From a decision, made with full information, by a man who had spent 2 years waiting for the ground beneath him to be solid enough to stand on. Then we agree on what happens next, Yoonho said. With Cha Won-soo. Yes, Kangmin said. Byung-chan was waiting outside the door. He took one look at Yoonho's face, at the particular quality of composure that means something large has been moved and carefully set back down, and his own face did something complicated. Yoonho. His voice had that careful note it only carried when he was genuinely afraid. What did they tell you? Enough, Yoonho said. They told me enough. Byung-chan grabbed his arm. His grip was tight. There's a man, he said. He's been asking about you. Outside the estate gates. Since yesterday. Byung-chan's hands were shaking by the time he finished talking, and Byung-chan did not shake easily. The man outside the gates had a name. Yoonho got it in fragments, delivered in a low voice in the east corridor with one eye on the nearest door. Tail. No family name offered. 30s, heavy build, standing across the street in a dark coat, not approaching, not leaving, just present in the patient way of someone who has been paid to wait. He had asked 2 questions of a junior staff member who had been unwise enough to step outside alone. Did Yoonho still work here, and which exit did he use most often? Byung-chan had heard this secondhand, but Byung-chan's second-hand information had never once been wrong. He's connected to someone inside the company, Yoonho said. How do you know that? Because someone outside the company would have no reason to care where I go. The steadiness in Yoonho's own voice surprised him slightly. He felt the shape of the threat, real, close, assembled from pieces he had not put together until this moment, and his body registered it the way it registered all danger now, not with panic, but with the cold clarity of a person who has already survived the worst thing once and knows what the space before impact feels like. Won-soo came for him that evening. Knocked once. Delivered the message without framing it as a request, because it was not one. Daehoon's instruction, Yoonho was being moved to the inner residence. Tonight. His belongings would be transferred. The staff quarters were no longer adequate for the current situation. Yoonho packed in 8 minutes. He had learned, in 2 years of reduced circumstances, not to accumulate more than he could carry quickly. The inner residence corridor smelled different from the staff wing, cedarwood and clean linen and the kind of silence that expensive architecture produces, where the walls are thick enough to absorb sound completely. Yoonho's footsteps changed against the flooring and he mapped the new space as he walked it, laying down the geometry of it in the part of his mind that held buildings. Seojun was in the corridor. Not performing. Not composed behind the warm public surface he maintained like a second skin. He was standing still with his arms at his sides and his face carrying something unguarded and direct, and when he spoke it was in a voice Yoonho had not heard from him before. Low, stripped of every layer except the essential one. I need you to understand something, Seojun said. Whoever comes for you comes to us first. That is not a courtesy. It is not a policy. It is not negotiable in any way, under any condition, for any reason. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. You are not alone in this house. You have not been alone in this house for some time. I need you to actually believe that. Yoonho stood inside those words and let them reach him. He wanted to deflect. He was very practiced at deflecting care, at receiving it with surface gratitude and keeping his actual interior at a careful remove, because needing people had stopped feeling safe the same year his sight did. But Seojun's voice had no room for deflection in it. It was the voice of a man who extracted information from full rooms and knew every way a person hid themselves, and who was choosing, right now, to offer something real instead. I believe you, Yoonho said. Seojun looked at him for a moment. Nodded once. Walked away. The room they gave Yoonho was larger than his entire apartment had been. Cedar. Cool air. Expensive quiet. He set his bag down and stood in the center of it and mapped it, the distance to the window, the location of the door, the particular echo of the space. It took less than 2 minutes. Then he lay down on the bed in the dark and stared at the ceiling and tried, with genuine effort, to reconstruct every rational reason that this situation was dangerous to him, not physically, but in the interior way, the way that cost more than physical things. He found two. They had always been enough before. Footsteps stopped outside his door. He heard them clearly in the expensive silence of the inner residence, measured, deliberate, carrying the specific weight he had learned to identify in the parking lot of this estate on a cold October night that had apparently changed more than he knew at the time. Come in. He did not knock. He stood outside the door for a long moment, long enough that it was no casual pause, long enough to be a choice being made in real time on the other side of a wall. Then the footsteps moved away. Down the corridor. Gone. Yoonho lay in the dark. He found his 2 reasons. Examined them. Put them back. They used to be enough. The cane broke at 11:43 on a Thursday morning, in the upper car park of Seohan University's School of Business building, and for exactly 4 seconds Yoonho did not know where he was. Not in the way of confusion, in the way of a man whose primary navigation tool has just been knocked from his hand by a shoulder that connected with too much force and too much purpose to be accidental, whose auditory map of the space scrambled when 2 voices appeared from directions that did not match the geometry he had built, whose body understood before his mind caught up that this was not a collision. This was a message. The broken cane lay on the concrete somewhere to his left. He could hear it. He stayed still, not frozen, but calculating, measuring the footsteps, the distance, the nearest wall, the direction of the elevator bay based on the ambient sound. 4 seconds of orientation. He had practiced this. He had practiced this because he had always known, in the clear-eyed way he knew most things, that the day might come when someone decided he was a problem worth solving. Wonsok reached him before the 2 men reached each other. He came fast from the south stairwell, and the quality of his arrival, the immediate physical placement of his body between Yoonho and the nearest threat, communicated everything about what he had been doing on the Seohan University campus every audit day for 3 weeks. Not assisting. Protecting. Those were different assignments. The 2 men left quickly. Wonsok did not pursue them. He picked up Yoonho's broken cane without being asked, placed it in Yoonho's hand so he could feel the brake, and said, "Car is 30 meters east. I have you." I know, Yoonho said. He was not shaking. He noted this. Filed it. They brought him back to the estate. All three triplets were in the main study when Yoonho arrived, and the room had a quality he had not felt in it before, the quality of men who have already decided what happens next and are in the final moments before it occurs. Kangmin made 2 phone calls in the time it took Won-sok to give his account. Seo-jun sent 3 messages in rapid succession, his thumbs moving with the calm efficiency of someone who has handled crises before and finds panic to be a waste of available time. By the following morning, according to the information Won-sok delivered at breakfast with the precise neutrality of reading a weather report, the man called Tail had left Seoul. Cha Won-soo, Operations Director, Manufacturing Division, had submitted his resignation. It had been accepted. The board alliances that had protected him for 11 years had apparently found, overnight, that protecting him was no longer worth the cost. Yoonho sat with this information and did not ask how. Some things were true without requiring their mechanism to be explained. What he did not know, until Dae-hoon came into the East Wing common room at midday with his left hand wrapped in a cloth that had gone dark at the center, was that Dae-hoon had been on the upper car park level before Won-sok. Had intercepted one of the 2 men before Won-sok's arrival changed the dynamic. Had not told anyone he planned to do this. Sit down, Yoonho said. It's minor. Dae-hoon. Sit down. He sat. Yoonho unwrapped the cloth with careful hands, found the cut by touch, not deep, clean-edged, the kind that comes from deflecting something rather than taking it directly. He cleaned it with what Won-sok brought without comment, and his hands were completely steady, and he worked in silence because the silence between them right now held more than either of them had words for. Dae-hoon watched his face while he worked. Did not look at his own hand. Looked at Yoonho, at the concentration, the precision, the complete absence of performance. Looked at him the way he had been looking at him for weeks, but with the last of whatever restraint had been moderating it entirely gone. You didn't tell anyone you were going up there, Yoonho said. No. Why? A pause. Direct and honest, the way Dae-hoon did everything. Because I couldn't lose you, he said. The words fell into the room and did not move. Yoonho's hand stilled on the bandage. 1 breath. 2. He finished the wrap and pressed the edge flat and did not let go of Dae-hoon's hand immediately afterward. Kangmin appeared in the doorway. Seo-jun behind him. The 3 of them in a room together, and Yoonho at the center of it, and no pretense left anywhere in the space between them. We want you to stay, Kangmin said. His voice was the same flat temperature it always was, and yet, it was not. Something had cracked open behind it, something that sounded, in Kangmin's voice, like the closest thing to vulnerability he apparently had access to. Not as staff. Yoonho looked up. Or looked in the direction that Kangmin's voice came from, which for him was the same thing. Then as what? He said. Ours, Kangmin said. 1 word. No decoration. No softening. Just the word, placed down in the open, and the silence after it that meant, I mean exactly what I said, and I am not going to qualify it, and I am not going to take it back. Yoonho sat inside that word. Felt the shape of it. Felt Dae-hoon's hand still inside his own, and the warmth of Seo-jun near the door, and Kangmin's unbending honest presence filling the frame of the room, and his chest expanded until it hurt, the way it does when something you stopped believing in suddenly turns out to be real. I need one thing first, he said. 3 pairs of attention absolute. The file on my father. I want it corrected. Officially. His name restored in Seohan's records. Not a private amendment. A formal correction with documentation. He kept his voice even. That is what I need. The silence that followed lasted exactly as long as it took Kangmin to decide. Done, he said. Just that. Done. As though his father's name had simply been waiting, all this time, for someone to finally stand up and ask for it back. 1 year later, Yoonho stood at a podium in the main hall of Seohan University's School of Business building, the same building he had walked back into 14 months ago with a broken scholarship, and a rebuilt cane, and the steady intention of doing something worth doing. He was not in a house staff uniform. He wore a dark fitted jacket and pressed trousers and the kind of quiet confidence that does not announce itself, that simply occupies its space and lets the work speak first. The hall was full: faculty, students, institutional representatives from 2 government ministries, a journalist from a national accessibility advocacy publication who had requested the interview 3 times before Yoonho agreed to it. He spoke for 22 minutes. He did not use notes. He had built the program from the audit findings and he knew every number, every structural recommendation, every policy gap his work had identified and addressed, the way he knew everything, precisely, completely, by a method that left no room for approximation. The Seohan accessibility framework was now formally adopted across 3 university campuses. It had been cited in a National Policy Working Group report as a model for institutional implementation. It was, by any measurable standard, the most significant applied ethics contribution to come out of the School of Business in 5 years. In the 3rd row, Byung-chan was crying. He was doing this with great subtlety and very little success, chin up, jaw tight, blinking at a rate that fooled absolutely no one seated near him. Jin-hyuk was beside him, no longer a student navigating an inaccessible corridor with a hand-drawn map of failures in his bag, but a paid junior researcher on the program, wearing his lanyard with the particular pride of someone who has been taken seriously by the right people at exactly the right time. Yoonho's father's name had been corrected in Seohan Group's internal employment records 4 months after Kangmin said the word done. A formal document. A full correction. No press release. Yoonho had not wanted one. Just the record, set straight, the way a crooked thing is set straight, quietly, finally, without ceremony, because the truth does not require an audience to be true. After the symposium, in the atrium, Jin-hyuk found him before the official reception began. He did not say much. He rolled his wheelchair to where Yoonho was standing and put his hand briefly on Yoonho's arm and said, "My mother read the report." His voice was pressed tight with something he was not going to cry about in a university atrium. "She said to tell you thank you." Yoonho put his hand over Jin-hyuk's for a moment. "Tell her it was yours too," he said. "You mapped that building before I ever arrived." They walked to the Han River afterward, all 4 of them. The late October cold had come back, the same cold as last year, the same darkness over the water, the same way the Seoul city lights smeared soft and gold on the surface of the river like something spilled from a great height. The walkway was quiet at this hour. Their footsteps made the only sound. Kangmin was on his left. Sejun was on his right. Daehoon was just behind him, close enough that Yoonho felt his warmth across the small distance between them without either of them needing to close it completely. They walked without occasion, without performance, without any reason except this, the 4 of them, together, in the cold, beside the river, going nowhere in particular. Yoonho tilted his face upward. The old habit. The way his skin reached for what his eyes had stopped being able to find. The cold air moved across his face, and the river smelled of water and winter, and the particular living quality of a city that has been here for hundreds of years and intends to remain for hundreds more. Then someone began to hum. Low. Quiet. Unhurried. The melody arrived so gently that for a moment Yoonho thought he had imagined it. He had not imagined it. A second voice joined. Then a third. 3 voices, carrying the melody he had sung alone in a cold parking lot 1 year ago, believing with absolute certainty that no one was listening, believing that the most dignified thing available to him was to mark his own existence for himself because no one else would. Yoonho stopped walking. He stood on the Han River walkway in the late October dark with the city light on the water and 3 voices around him, and the smile that moved across his face was not the small private thing it had been that night in the parking lot. It was not a smile that had given up on being witnessed. He let himself be witnessed. He stood inside it, all of it, the year, the weight that had been carried and set down, his father's name restored in a document that would outlast all of them, Jin-hyuk's mother's thank you, Byung-chan crying in a university hall, Daehoon's hand in his own, Kangmin's single word, Sejun's voice in a corridor saying you are not alone in this house, and he breathed, and the October cold went all the way through him. And for the first time in years it did not feel like something to endure. It felt like proof. A year ago, he had sung to himself in the dark because there was no one else to do it. Because dignity, when everything has been stripped away, is the last sovereign act available to a person, and he had exercised it in the only space that remained, a cold parking lot, a flickering lamp, a melody no one was supposed to hear. But here is what he knew now, standing beside the river with 3 voices carrying the song he had carried alone. Your worth does not require a witness. That is still true. It will always be true. But there is a difference, and it matters, between not needing to be seen, and refusing to let yourself be seen, even when the right eyes are finally looking. He had spent a long time refusing. He was done refusing. The song ended. The river moved below them. The city went on being the city, loud and brilliant and indifferent and alive. Daehoon's hand found his in the dark, not reaching, just arriving, and Yoonho held it, and did not let go and did not need to explain why. He had always known where things were. He simply had to wait for this one to find its way to him. If this story found you tonight, if Yoonho's quiet strength moved something in you, if the parking lot scene stayed with you, if you felt the Han River in your chest at the end, then you already know what this channel is about. Stories that carry real weight. Stories where the people who were overlooked are finally, fully seen. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you are here when the next story begins. Every episode on this channel is built to stay with you, and you do not want to miss what comes next. If this story meant something to you, say so in the comments. Tell us what you felt. Tell us which moment hit hardest. Tell us which of the 3 triplets you were rooting for from the beginning. Those comments are not just engagement, they are the reason the next story gets made. And if you know someone who is carrying their pain beautifully right now, someone who is singing to themselves in a dark parking lot somewhere, and has not yet been seen, share this story with them. That is why it was written. Not just to be watched. To reach the people who need to hear it. Thank you for staying until the end. This was only the beginning.